And we are back. Okay, and who I was referring to was Antonio Brown. Now, he played for Tampa Bay. Now, his incident happened back on the 3rd of January. Malik's McDowell's situation happened just last week. My question is, what's going on out here? I mean, what do you think? Do we need to treat it? We got a caller on the line, Larry. Larry?
Yeah, hi, Attorney Evans. I'm going to give you my take on it, and I'm going to have to choose my words carefully because I don't want to seem like I'm indifferent and sensitive to the plight of today's athletes. And when you look at today's athletes, the athletes of today, with the money, with the endorsements, with to me, back in the day, there was never, back in the old days, in the 60s and maybe even in the early 70s, the athletes, I don't want to just limit it to the NFL, because do you remember Dennis Rodman?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember the situation where he was acting up and he actually even brought a rifle to the practice, when he was with the Pistons back, I believe it was in 1992. I don't know if you remember that. And so a lot of people thought he had some issues of mental illness. But what I'm trying to get at is this. The whole problem, and as far as a lot of these guys, where I don't know where to draw the line between being sensitive to the issues that they have and being and really looking at things that a lot of these guys, some of the things they're doing some of these actions, I'm not talking about the issues that you're talking about with this Malik McDowell or Antonio Brown. A lot of these guys are doing things that they would never even have a job. Some of the crazy things that you would question, gee, what's wrong with this guy? Some of the things that a lot of the athletes are doing because they know they can get away with it, or get away with a slap on the wrist. I mean, things like, okay, domestic abuse. Look at all the athletes that are involved in domestic situations.
Okay.
And so I think that this whole issue doesn't just come down to the team has a responsibility, because the problem is, think of it this way. How many people, okay, so Antonio Brown's been with 4 teams, I believe, in his career.
Okay.
Think of it one way. There's one way to look at it. If they had a regular job, you got to remember that all the athletes, be it baseball, football, basketball, hockey, any way you look at it, they are an elite group. There's only so many people that get the opportunity. Most people will never have that opportunity. Most people go to a job every day that in many cases they don't even like. So there is a sense that a lot of these guys are being treated like privileged characters.
Okay.
And a lot of them take advantage of that. And what I'm trying to say is if somebody did some of the things that, as an example, Antonio Brown did, they would have been fired on the spot. I mean, true, he was fired because he acted out in that game on the 3rd of January. But think of it this way. How many players would have even gotten that far to have had that kind of an opportunity to go to 3 or 4 teams and stay in the league, as opposed to just getting tossed right out on the street? Because if you really think about it, if you or I or most other people acted out and did some of the things that a lot of the players in not just football, in all of professional sports, they would not even have a job. They would be on the street. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that you have to look at before we just say who is responsible for the actions of, you're speaking specifically about this particular football player. This is far beyond football. This is far beyond football. I think this is a epidemic of what professional sports are today, because the money, because of all the money, the fame, and all the other things, you know, a lot of these people, a lot of these players have riches beyond the normal person. And a lot of them have got this idea that they can
right.
do and say and act out any way they want.
I agree with that.
I just think
and there are some people that do that. But one of the things is right. But one of the things that we look at when you look at football and you look at the CTE, recently, about a month ago, an autopsy finds severe brain trauma in ex-NFL player who is accused of shooting 6 people. So what happens is it doesn't develop overnight like cancer. But then when you start to see symptoms, you overlook them because of the utility of that individual. So now this young man, he done killed 6 people, okay? I mean, this was some years ago that Philip Adams has killed 6 people about 15 years ago. And I'm saying to you, you know, what are we doing? I'm sorry, this was recently, but I'm saying he played some time ago. I mean, what are we doing? Are we not being sensitive to say, now there are some people that are just acting out, just being, you know, they just, you know, because they want the attention? Or is it a call for help?
Because that's just it. Maybe they want attention, but there's also this idea that a lot of times they don't realize that they're in an elite group and that they're just going to get by with a fine or something, or a fine or a 2-game suspension for domestic, you know, whatever the case might be. But the problem is, what I'm trying to say is, and I know we're talking about different things, like you're talking about the trauma of football, being hit in the head so many times. And that's an issue within itself. My whole thinking about a lot of today's athletes is that you never heard back in the old days when you know there was still football back in the 60s and the 50s and all that, and you never would hear about some of the things now. Then
Larry, you ain't hear about COVID either. And you didn't hear, people didn't die of cancer as much as they did. You know, when people say, well, you know, they had heart attacks, strokes, you know, a lot of this obviously has to do with what we're eating, we're ingesting. But looking back in those days, we didn't have the type of ailments and people didn't live as long. Okay, a person died or whatever, they say, well, they're, but you know, the thing about it is I'm reading something that says that there's a gentleman, Mr. McKee, who directs the CTE. And they say that these diseases have 4 stages. And the disease is primarily active in a person's 20s to 30 years old. The second stage is associated with progressive cognitive and behavior abnormalities, such as aggression, impulsivity, explosivity, depression, paranoia, anxiety, poor executive functions, and memory loss. Okay, so I'm wondering whether or not these, I know what you're saying, you know, they just want to, you know, act out, you know, and, you know, for people to look at them, or are these symptomatic of people who have this illness and you can't detect it until you have an autopsy because you have to remove the brain? So what we do is when we see somebody acting all impulsive, doing all this crazy stuff, we want to automatically attribute to, well, you know, maybe he's just showing out, or maybe he just wants attention, when in actuality, it may be that this person is suffering from this type of trauma that you can't diagnose until death. There's nothing that you can't do it because you have to look at the brain. They were talking about many of the individual, Aaron Hernandez. They said Aaron Hernandez's brain stopped developing, or the brain was almost like a 13 or 14-year-old. But he was still showing up with that ball. But he has serious issues and you can't detect it. So when you see this level of aggression, anxiety, paranoia, then all of a sudden, how do we address it? You can't until that person dies. There's nothing to say this person is suffering from CTE. It's just that all we can look at the behavior. So the fact of the matter is that even when before CTE was even developed, the NFL was like, we don't want no parts of that. Football is an all-American sport, and we are not going to let science come in and take away from its wholesomeness, from it being wholesome. We don't want that. It doesn't have a place here. And they fought it until they finally had to recognize these boys are dying from this. Many times when people died back then who was touching that ball, didn't nobody do no autopsy, or it wasn't as advanced to see that it was something like CTE. Those developments came about in the 90s. So how many professional people may have suffered from that, but it wasn't detected? We'll be back. This is Vonda'S Court Unfiltered. Give us a call. Let's hear from you.